Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, I have meditation coach for startup founders and CEOs, Wendy Nash. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Of course. Wendy, where are you from?
So I'm from Sydney. I grew up here. I grew up on the outskirts of Sydney, and I've also lived in Sweden. And I lived there for a year as a teenager. I've lived in London for 5 years in my early 20s. I then moved to France, lived in the outskirts of Paris and commuted every day. So I did sort of French commute, which is just as bad as every other commute. And then I came back here, and then a couple of years ago, I spent a few years in Oxford, and then I came back here again. So it's been a bit of a back and forth roller coaster for sure.
Well, that's amazing. I think it's actually, I just want to say congratulations. You are my first international guest on the show, and it's great to see that this is expanding internationally and you're able to make a bigger impact on the world. I was extremely impressed by your profile. You are a meditation coach for startup founders and CEOs. As a startup myself, I personally think I can get a lot of value from this. So I thought it'd be great to bring you on the show just so other people can be inspired and also learn from meditation. So if you'd like to talk about more of your background and what meditation is and how people can use it.
Okay, so my background actually, so the reason there was so much international travel was actually a lot about I just got to get out of where I was. My sister died when I was a child, when I was a toddler, and then my father died also when I was 13. So it was very, very painful childhood. I mean, that's just some of it. There's a lot more in there, but I was in it just very hurt and very pained by my life. I was very angry, and I was very hurt, and I was very prone to being sensitive. And so I was crashing and burning all my relationships. And I just didn't want to ever be wrong. And because it triggered so much guilt, shame, and humiliation. So so now I just want to put out there that I actually love being wrong. Being wrong is one of my favorite things of all time, because that's where all the fun and the joy is. And that's where you kind of go, it really pulls you down a bit, and it really makes you kind of a more comfortable person to be with. So I sort of sought lots of counseling. I did see a counselor, a psychotherapist. She was number 19. So just to give you a scale about my level of perseverance to sort this out. And she was just amazing. And she completely transformed me from being this very angry, bitter, hurt person who was crashing relationships left, right, and center to and I saw her actually last year on a retreat. She was the one who encouraged me to take up meditation, and I was able to tell her that I am no longer angry. So that's where that was my starting point. And so I just want to put it out there to the people, to yourself and others around that. We come into the world with our circumstances, which are what they are. And it is possible to change. You do have to apply yourself. So it's not going to change without effort and application, actually. You just have to kind of keep going with it. But whatever you're born with, that doesn't mean to say you have to stay with that. But it's not going to change it by your own accord. And it's not just kind of think differently. You've actually got to do it at a really systemic level, because that's where the change is. And so now that's why I love being wrong, because I'm like, yeah, well, I'm a doofus. I messed that one up, didn't I? Let's try again. What other options are there? So I've crashed and burned pretty much every aspect of my life. And that's kind of what makes me courageous, in fact, because I just go, well, what's the worst that can happen? There's not much worse that can happen. So I'm good with that. That's all good. So what I do is I actually teach entrepreneurs to meditate. And the reason, and I'm, because startup founders, it's a really long haul. It's a really difficult process. It's emotionally demanding. It's full of failure. It's full of rejection. All those sort of childhood issues come up. And so we just talk about the fear of failure, humiliation, guilt, shame. And can we bring it to the table? And what I really focus on loving kindness meditation. And that's because we really need to be kind to ourselves. And it's through being kind to ourselves that we're kind to others. And of course, it's through kind to others that we are kind to ourselves. So it's not, we are no, you sort of I and me, we are not different, if you see what I mean. Like, it's a really dynamic process. So nothing is ever static or fixed, and we never really arrive. So you just kind of got to go there and kind of do it. And loving kindness is what gives us the heart to be able to do that, the courage, the emotional fortitude, if you like.
That's great. So you're saying it's because of your past you got onto this path of meditation and the self improvement, and you're creating a career out of this because of your past experiences. You're trying to help others so they can navigate similar situations in their own lives.
Yeah, that's right. And it actually, it's because I crashed and burned so effectively that I had to reevaluate every part of my life. Everything was up for question. And that's actually, and it means then when clients come to me and they say, oh, but I'm shamed, I'm like, yeah, in the beginning, the first time you feel really shame, it's really horrible, but trust me, by the time you get to 20,000 times, it's actually really like, oh well, anyway, so let's have a cup of tea, like it's really nothing. So everything is very workable, definitely.
So, with your experience working with other entrepreneurs, what do you see as some of their biggest struggles and issues?
Well, it's this, we're all human, so it's all exactly the same. Um, there is something about, you do need to be in it for the long haul, definitely. Um, and it's not an easy game. It's it's you have to want it. Definitely. It's not like in corporate you can kind of, or I did admin for a long time because that allowed me to travel. I did a 1 year uh, uh, secretarial course just so I could live and earn an income. I knew it wouldn't be too demanding and I could do that. So that's why I did that. So now where was I up to? Something about, yeah, so I know. So basically when I used to just turn up to a job, I just turned up to the job and I went home. But this is when that when you run your own business, and I know that now, it's kind of there all the time, and you have to create a frame around it to make sure it's not completely overwhelming. But nonetheless, it is kind of everything. It is a big long haul. So there is a lot of tenacity that's required and perseverance, I suppose. Um, and the sense of failure is right there. Like, I have one client and he's been working on his project for about 7 years, I think, 7 or 8 years. And the funding is just still coming through. And a couple of weeks ago, he thought the company was going to fold now. And the funding just came through. And that'll tide him for another 18 months. And then he still has to keep, going. So it's this whole sense of, oh my goodness, I've got this responsibility to staff. I want to do this really amazing thing. I've put myself out here on a limb. Um, and, there's a lot of cost in relationships. So he met a girl and it was really lovely. But his job is so demanding. He can't be in a demanding relationship and have a demanding job. It's too much. The body falls over. So there is that. It's important to bring everything down into a containable level, but that's very, very hard to do when you start your business. That's what I would say.
So, with your meditation, do you think that directly impacts it? Is it going to be hey, let me meditate today, that's going to help? Or is this an ongoing process for the rest of your life to help you deal with these situations?
Well, both. So you need to, I mean, I think I would encourage everybody to meditate every day. Not everybody is ready to meditate. I don't think it's for everybody. And I think there are different ways of meditating. So one is to sit on a cushion and focus on the breath, or like, my favorite one is, and this is for somebody who has no time, they're just driving into work or whatever it is to is just to remember all the acts of kindness that happened in the previous 24 hours. So if you think about, like, it was so lovely that you invited me onto the show, you're well prepared, you're well organized, you're very affable, you're amiable. Um, that's such a lovely, warm gesture that of kind of thoughtfulness, and to just really take that in. Now, yes, okay, so you've got your business, but I have mine, but it's a mutual experience where you can kind of look at these experience. I find it's good to look at any experience and find the kindness in it, and that just really starts the day. So that's quite a nice way to do it, no matter where you are. And there are other meditation practices, like you can, if you have a walk to a bus stop or something like that, you just count the steps up to 10 and then start again at 10 and then go backwards, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 9, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. It takes a bit more concentration. So it's about training the mind. Or if you've got kids and it's all crazy and mayhem, you might have a corridor in your house, in which case every time you step on the corridor, you just go, my feet are grounded on the floor, just to give the body a chance to calm down. Another one is if you, every time you reach for the mouse, you just take a second just to pause and feel the texture, the temperature of the mouse. So these are all meditations. And it's just about kind of bringing yourself back to where you are. If you have a little bit more time, it's good to do something which is a little bit longer. And I always recommend, so with some people, with the beginners, I say, well, when you get into bed at night, just put on your phone for 60 seconds, set a timer, turn off the, on airplane mode, and just sit there and just count breaths if that's what you want. And then do that for 1 week. And then the next week, you could do it for 2 weeks. Always good to keep it conservative. And then you can expand gently and slowly. It takes a while to build up a routine. So there's lots of small little techniques to do just to make it very, very manageable in life.
Wow, that's great. First off, I had no idea there were that many types of meditations and how there's almost an infinite number of variations, and that's really exciting for me. And you're saying you can get benefits with just 60 seconds of meditation a day?
Yeah, I think it's good at the beginning. So you've said that you meditate often, and it's really difficult to set up a routine, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to expect that somebody who's never meditated to sit for half an hour a day, that's a huge leap. So I even find that for many people who have very whirring minds, 5 minutes is too much. So just to slow down for 1 minute, you just do that and think of it as kind of, well, next week I'll sit down for 2 minutes. And then after a month, then you're at 5 minutes. After 15 weeks, you're at 15 minutes. So think of it as a kind of, because it's a whole slow, gradual process. And the point is not with the counting breath. You're probably more familiar with that. Is that one that you're familiar with?
Yeah.
Yep. The point of that is not, so just for your audience, so it's not to sort of breathe in, it's you breathe in and you breathe out and you count 1. You breathe in and you breathe out and you count 2. And then the idea is that you get up to 10. But the point is not to get to 10. The point is to notice that you are off with the pixies and having a lovely holiday somewhere in your mind, or caught in some drama of whatever it is. And then simply just to begin again and start again. And so there's a couple of things in that. One is it stops the story. The story really wants to keep going for quite a long time. It's quite a long practice to not get caught in the story. But just to sit with that. And so it's just about training the mind to kind of get out of the habit of always being caught on every single story. Yeah. And there is actually, I would like to just put in one more meditation technique. So some people are runners. They love to run. That meditation is not their bag. And I really believe that people who don't want to meditate shouldn't meditate. So I'm all good with that. I think it's really important. And likewise, I follow Buddhism. I think I always, I have a Muslim client, and so we use the Quran as, I say, well, how would you say that in the Quran? So I just use that, or if someone's Christian, then I convert it to that, or whatever it may be, Hindu, whatever. So I always put it within the context of that. So if someone's a runner, or perhaps they clean the house or something like that, then there's a really good question when you can do this at the beginning of meditation, a beginning of a run, or beginning of cleaning the house. It needs to be something fairly monotonous. You bring to mind a problem you've got, and then you go, what am I not seeing about this?
That's great. There's a lot of information right there, and I want to backtrack, and there's multiple ways I could take this conversation. So let's go to the Buddhism side.
Okay.
That's great that you said you practice Buddhism.
Yeah.
Could you talk about Buddhism? What is it? What are some core philosophies and beliefs that you follow, and how can that be applied to entrepreneurs and startups?
There are 4 truths that the noble ones believe. They are usually called the 4 noble truths, but it's 4 truths. So it's not that the truths are noble, it's that the people who believe them are noble, and that's what makes them a truth. And the first truth is, life kind of sucks sometimes. There is dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction can be from a sort of a mild unease. My cup of tea is a bit tepid now, so it's not quite as beautiful as it was when I started. Right up to, or maybe you feel a bit edgy in a meeting or something, right up to, Ukraine war. So everything in the middle of that, it just says things will be uncomfortable, and allow yourself to be uncomfortable. So that's one of them. I think that's a really important thing, is to not keep moving on to the next and the next to avoid it. Just because I think allowing oneself to be where we are and feel a little bit uncomfortable, as I said, being wrong is actually kind of the best thing, because then you kind of start from a new place. And that's where you are. If you're a bit Ms, you're a bit Ms, and you just sort of sit there going, yeah, I'm a bit glum. And then, well, when you're that, for about 5 minutes, okay, I'm a bit glum for 5 minutes, and then I get on with my life and whatever it is. So it's really about emotional efficiency, I would say, from that perspective. Another one is that everything is always in a state of flux. You never arrive. So for your listeners, there's many people who want to start a business. They're waiting for the perfect moment. They're waiting for the perfect circumstances. Or even if you're in a corporate career, or I want, when things settle down, and there is a sort of a low grade settling, but to imagine that it's ever going to be perfect, you have arrived, everything will be in place, that's never going to happen. And so what I find Buddhism does is it helps me navigate that. There are 4 basic, what they call the 4 immeasurable qualities. So there is love, which is that each person has a capacity to comes into the world with the desire to love, and we can foster more of that. And that's a big part of my practice. I was very angry, as I said, and took me a long time. I didn't even know what love was. I had a very painful childhood, and I was just like, people talk about this loving thing. What does that even mean? I was completely foreign to it. And then now I just absolutely, that's what I do. It's my philosophy. The next one is compassion, empathy. And that is really that we are in it together. So we've got a problem. Let's be in this together to find a solution. It's not pity, and it's not stretching out a helping hand to help someone up. It's kind of really putting yourself in the other person's shoes and going, well, what would be helpful to you? And working with that. The next one is joy. Joy. Like I a couple of years ago, I was very earnest, and very serious in my goodness. And I thought, oh my God, I feel like, excuse me, my blasphemy. I feel like such a wet blanket and so serious. It was awful. And I thought, what's missing? And I thought, joy. And I bought a book because I'm a very keen reader. And I thought, oh, well, I want a Buddhist book on joy, and it's called Awakening Joy. So I thought, oh, yeah, I'll buy that one, number one, And, um, and sort of, paragraph one, it says, what stops you being joyful right now? And I'll ask you that question in a second when I've got to the end of it. But I sort of felt really guilty about being joyful, given Ukraine, given abuse, given poverty, given everything. And I just felt really sort of almost ashamed and guilty for being joyful when there's so much misery. And then I thought, gee whiz, why would I want to be a miserable git? Why add to that? Like, it's important to be empathic with people and to be with them where they are and support them and all that. But gee, it'd be nice to do that with a bit of lightness in the heart. So that's the third one. And the fourth one, that's a little bit more complicated. It's called equanimity. And that just means to not be dismissive, but not to indulge either. So not to get too caught up, but not to be really offhand either. There's this sweet spot where things arrive and then they pass. And we engage with them emotionally, but then we let them go. So, and the process of meditation, as you can sort of hear from that, is, you do the breath counting, it arises, the story arises, and then you just come back. And so it arises and it comes back, and that's the process. So I think that's enough. That's plenty. But I hope that some of that is useful. So I would say, all right. So is there, do you feel that sometimes your life is not joyful? And if so, what is it that stops you being joyful?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Every now and then, of course, right? Everyone has those ups and downs. And during those down moments, it's important, in my opinion, to be aware of it, figure out what's causing it, and then try to figure out, okay, I'm upset. It's okay to be upset, but being intentional that you are upset, not letting it drag on, but give yourself permission to be upset for the next 24 hours, right? Something didn't go your way, you didn't get your job, you didn't pass that exam. Give yourself permission to be upset, feel the emotions. But the thing is, being upset's not going to change that. In fact, it's going to hinder all further progress, or that's how I see it. So I think it's important to feel it, accept it, and then figure out how can you move on to get the next job or pass the next exam. And that's how I view it. So just acknowledge it and move on after you feel it.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting it. It's, you've got to kind of hang in there with what's unpleasant. And then, yeah, it will just pass, actually. And if some story does keep going, like you didn't get your exam or you didn't get the job, and you're still a bit miserable, I'd say there is something else going on that needs to be attended to. So make that a point of inquiry. What am I not seeing about this? So that's what I would say. It will just pass. Things go. When things are resolved, they'll just resolve.
No, that's absolutely right. Could you go back and summarize those 4 points again? That was a lot of information, just so I and the audience can kind of have it concisely.
So the 5 main things that I've covered. One is life can be a bit crappy sometimes. So you've said, you failed the exam or didn't get the job, and that is just going to be what happens. We're human beings. We're very sensory. The other one was called the 4 immeasurables, which is to look for the love in life, within oneself, within others. Compassion, which is to be within the space of another person, wherever they are, I guess. Have compassion within, from their perspective. To be joyful in all endeavors as much as possible. And to recognize that things will come and go, and to have a sense of space around that.
That's great. Thank you so much for summarizing all that. Now, before we start talking about Buddhism, I said there are multiple ways I want to take the conversation. So now let's pivot it a little bit more. Would you be able to talk about, I guess, the technical aspect of why meditation works? Are you well versed in the psychology or the science behind it?
Sure. So I have a somatic psychotherapy diploma. So I have and which means it's a body-oriented psychodynamic approach. It has a slightly more Freudian without it being kind of too, whatever. And I also have a psychology degree. So I have a psychological background. Sorry, just ask me the question again.
Would you be able to talk about the technical aspect of why meditation works
Okay. So
from a science background? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, no, from the science background. So I was actually reading an article, it was really good, on the greater good. So that's a wonderful resource, by the way, about how to be a good leader, how to be a good person without it, from a scientific perspective, a psychological perspective. It comes out of Berkeley University. And they were talking about the capacity to hold multiple identities. So not getting stuck as, I'm Australian, I'm a woman. And yes, these things are true, but I'm also a global citizen. I also come from Sydney. I also am a person of a particular age and a particular, I'm white, I'm upper middle class. And that in one instance I can be quite hardworking, but then I can also be quite lazy. I can be quite enthusiastic. So it sort of softens that tendency to kind of be stiff about one particular identity. I'm going to be successful. Because, we fail sometimes too, but we fail in this way, but we're successful in that way. And to keep it becomes much looser in that regard. So it's called multiple identities. And there was a wonderful article on the greater good about that yesterday.
Thank you so much for all that information. Now let's move on to some questions which I ask all of our guests. If you had to start your business again, what would be something you'd change?
I would take advantage of some of the resources in the local. So we have a local library, and I think in the US it's quite an important resource. So it's all free. It's a public service. It helps the community. It helps other people. The more you engage with the council and the library, the more other people are aware of it. And so that has a sort of a social aspect, but it's all free. So they will tell you about local networking groups. They will tell you about business things, other ways that you need to do. Perhaps they might tell you about a community college course or so they're just a really amazing resource. They're free. The people are super lovely and helpful. So I would definitely say that. And the other thing I would do is that every day I would write down something that I had done for the business. So as I sort of start to build up. So I would have, even if it's just, so what am I going to do about the computer? What computer do I need? And to just write down, wondered what to do about the computer. It's because all those are kind of add up, and then you can see the progression, and it just means that every day you're kind of on focus, but it's not so demanding that you have to think, oh my God, I haven't done anything, or I haven't, excuse my blasphemy, or I haven't, I'm not doing enough or whatever, because it just goes to show you've got a track record that every day you do just one thing and just keeps things on the right track without it being too overwhelming. You can always refer back.
That's great. So you said things you would change is utilizing the free resources offered.
Yeah.
And you would also keep track of what you've accomplished every day.
Yeah. And they can be really tiny. Just not accomplished, but just something that you have done towards the business. Yeah. So you don't have to be super successful. It might just be a question you have. I thought about that. Yeah.
I love it. Just very small things to keep the ball rolling.
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
So as you're big into self-improvement, as you are a meditator, I'm sure you must have some great habits as well. What are some habits that you think have shaped you into the person you are?
So I used to be, and I still am a little bit, but I used to be awake a lot in the night. And so I've told you the breathing technique, but I was telling a friend of mine who is an alternative therapist, and he said, "Oh, how much water are you drinking?" And I said, "Not much." He said, "You need to drink 2 liters of water a day, or your kidneys will dehydrate at 3 o'clock in the morning." So I just have a really great technique. I've got like these 2 mugs. So I've got two, one of tea and one of water in this instance, just because it's in the morning. And I put 4 of these on my desk in the morning. and I put 4 again in after lunch, and I get to the end of the day, that's my 2 liters. So it's super practical, super simple. But then I know that if it's just in front, so you have to put it in front of your desk, so you just pick it up as you go along, and it's just super easy. So just that, those two, I think is really one of them. I did admin for a long time, so I am super organized, and I'm also really able to cold call people. Like I'm not shy about that, because I just go, okay, well, I need to get this done so I can get it done. So I'm not shy about that. So that's definitely good. Of course, I meditate daily. I do something called the Couch to 5K. I took it up during the pandemic. Do you know the Couch to 5K? It's a running program. I used to completely hate running, and so it gets you from a couch potato doing nothing up to 5 kilometers over a 2 month period. So running 2 kilometers a day, or every second day, actually. So it's just it's a little bit every day, not too much, just enough to keep you going.
Congratulations. So with this program, you got from couch to running a 5K.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And now I've got the couch to 10K. So I'm
Oh
like
my gosh.
I'm going to run 10 kilometers 3 times a week. That's my goal.
That's amazing.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
That's not easy.
Thank you.
As you're dealing with a bunch of different entrepreneurs, have there been certain issues that you see arising over and over again, certain types of issues?
The main one, I think, with founders is that they expect staff and colleagues to be as engaged with it as they are. So a common one is they're not dedicated enough. And no one is going to be as engaged as the founder and the CEO, the startup person, because they've got everything invested. Their like whole identity is invested in this getting working. So don't and in fact use their lack of dedication as a marker. So dedication to me just means a person is resentful of how much they're doing. So that's a marker of resentment, and that you're overcommitted and you need to pull back in some areas. You need to recalibrate your life. So use it as a marker to kind of go, okay, I'm actually doing too much here. I need to rethink a little bit and take a little bit of a leaf out of their book. So I would say that's the biggest one.
That's great. So, going off that, is there a piece of advice that you'd give to every entrepreneur that's listening to this, or someone who's just trying to start their business?
I think it's difficult when you do work at home to not make it all the time. I think turning off your phone, like you can actually remove icons, and Uber, you just, if you're eating Uber Eats, then you can just remove the icon. So that's an easy way to not get too caught up in the treat things. One of my clients, he's like, oh, I can just remove the icon. I would say turn your phone onto airplane mode, and every night. So turn it onto airplane mode at about 7 o'clock when you finish the day, and then don't turn it back on until I don't know, breakfast or whatever it is. So it just gives your mind a bit of respite. Even turn it off is actually much better, but sometimes people need it for their alarm. But you can remove an app at night, and then you can put it back on in the morning. So you, that's what I would say. Try and
So, disconnecting.
disconnect, and you can do it in small ways. It doesn't have to be big. You can do it in small ways, and seek out joyful, go into nature if you can. It's obviously not always possible, but find lightness. Get other people to be positive to you. You can't just give and give and give. You've got to have something coming back. So the other thing I would say, sorry about going, I know I give a lot of information. The other one is to really focus on how to receive gracefully. So if someone makes you a cup of tea, if you live with other people, or someone makes you dinner, or they go up to the shops and buy you your groceries or whatever it is, or somebody, I don't know, whatever it is. So it doesn't matter how small. Just kind of like really turn around to them and say, oh, thank you for making dinner. That's really lovely. I really appreciate that. It's so nice that you took the time and care to prepare a beautiful meal. Very small. But what that does is, apart from it restores your relationships and keeps everything good, because it makes everything, they then feel appreciated, of course. But it actually is more about, I've got something coming in. Because so much about, as you know, about being an entrepreneur is about what's going out. But actually it helps to recalibrate, to notice what is coming in. So that.
I love it. So you're saying give back, but also learn how to receive properly, because that's a big part of the equation.
And actually, I would say that's kind of one of the big problems we have in our society. Everybody is rushing around doing, and helping others, helping others, helping others. But I think it can really lead to a lot of resentment and burnout. And just, yeah, really receiving gracefully is a tremendous gift. Somebody has gone out of their way for you, and they have thought of you, and it's like, to receive that with grace is really a beautiful act of kindness. Yeah.
That's great. If you had a favorite business book that you'd recommend to any entrepreneur, which book would it be?
Okay. So as you've gathered, I don't just stick to one. I've got three. So I'm going to do all three because
Perfect. Give me all three.
So we were on a video call. So I'm going to show you. So one of the big things is the email management. How on earth can you manage those 5 gazillion emails and not go crazy? And as I said, it's all about going out. So how do you kind of manage that demand? This is the best book. It's called Smart Work by Dermot Crowley. And what he does is he says you get the email in, you set a task for it, and you schedule it. And then you kind of, then it means that your day is well planned. You've got a good idea about what you need to attend to. Nothing falls off. Nothing gets bottom of the email list. Everything can be attended to. So that's amazing for email management. Stop you going crazy. Another one is, and this is a really good book, Rapport by Lawrence and Emily Allison. And this one is about building rapport. These guys, he is an academic in terrorist and criminal, investigations. So when they're in an interview and they're trying to get credible evidence from terrorists and criminals about what they've done, what's going on, you need to build rapport and respect. And so they have done it in a very step-by-step kind of way, and you can use those same principles. She's a social worker, so she works with domestic violence families, and so the same principles apply. And it's just basically, this is how to step through. It's not formulaic. It's just super practical. So both of those are super practical. And this third one is one which sort of sits somewhere in the middle. I don't know, what's your memory like?
It's average.
Yep. So this one is the third one, Memory Craft by Lynn Kelly. And she writes it's just beautiful prose apart from anything else. And she has something like 100 different techniques that she uses for memorization, from very simple to more complicated. And she did her PhD on a whole variety of First Nations practices on memorization, because they didn't have pen and paper. They had to memorize everything, and they had an incredible amount of knowledge right sort of wherever they were. And so she just sets it all out, and it's beautiful, it's simple, it's practical. I'm a great one for being practical. So they're my 3 books. I'm sorry for giving more than you asked for.
I love all 3 of those books. I haven't read any of them, but they're very interesting, the topics that you mentioned. So excited to read them. So thank you for those recommendations. Well, Wendy, it's been incredible to have you on the show. Where can our audience get in touch with you to learn more about you and your services?
So I've got a website, kindlycutthecrap.com. So I believe that kindness is really important, but let's just cut the crap. I don't I'm very practical. Let's keep it simple. Let's get straight down to the point, but you don't have to be brutal about it. So kindlycutthecrap.com. And the other one is LinkedIn. I just have Wendy Nash LinkedIn profile, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, I'll be able to put both of those links on the show notes, so those who are listening can definitely get in touch with Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you. I learned a lot about meditation. These books sound incredible, and uh, really glad you were able to come on the show.
It's been such a lovely conversation. I have so enjoyed it. And it's just such a privilege to be able to share what I have learnt along the way and a bit about my journey. So and you've been just such a lovely host. So thank you very much for the time and effort to get this all organized in the podcast program. So thank you very much. It's lovely.